Welcome to the Design Vault, a show about the past, present, and future of design. The Design Vault is a conversation hosted by Shum and Thamer Abanami, reflecting on iconic products and ideas from the past and rethinking them from new perspectives.
Testing. 1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3.
Let's do this.
Okay.
I'm Shum.
And I'm Thamer Abanami. Today, we're examining a product that fundamentally changed how we think about time, control, and television. It's a product so revolutionary, it became a verb. Yet, somehow, it could not capitalize on the future it created. We are talking today about TiVo.
Well, Thamer, when you're saying pause live TV today, it seems so obvious. Every streaming service does it. Like when I watch Netflix or any show, I get like, hey, I need to go run and do an errand or something. I just pause it. And your cable box does it now. But in 1999, when TiVo demonstrated this feature at CES, people literally couldn't comprehend how it works. Like they were just blown away. Journalists asked if there was some like magic trick behind all this.
That's what makes TiVo such a perfect Design Vault story. It's a company that invented the future. They pioneered time shifting. They created binge watching. And they designed the first truly intuitive TV interface. And they even had recommendation algorithms that were predictive. Yet today, most people under 30 probably have never used one.
well, I definitely use one.
Yeah, you're under 30.
Yeah. It's also, for me, it's the ultimate innovator's dilemma.
Yeah.
TiVo liberated viewers from the tyranny of like having to like figure out the TV schedule. And I'm old enough to remember that the TV Guide was a booklet or magazine. And the industry eventually saw this constraint as a revolution because it liberated viewers from having to fixate their viewing schedule. And it's really also a story about brilliant design, a bit of bad timing, and the complex dynamics of trying to disrupt an entire industry.
100%. And you know what's fascinating is even though TiVo as a product might seem like ancient history, every single streaming service you mentioned earlier, like Netflix or YouTube or Hulu, today is essentially running TiVo's playbook. The interface that Netflix has, the YouTube TV's cloud DVR, Hulu's pause and rewind, it's all TiVo's DNA. It's just without the acknowledgement. But that's how it works. Yeah.
So today we're going to explore not just what made TiVo revolutionary, but why being revolutionary wasn't enough. And sometimes, especially in design, being too early, well, it's just bad.
Yeah, timing is everything. So before we dive into the story of TiVo and the peanut remote and the pause button that changed everything, let's talk about why it matters in 2025. I'm sure when people are streaming everything today, the idea of recording shows seems quaint.
Right, because TiVo isn't a nostalgic tech story. It's really relevant. I mean, today we use those features all the time. It's a masterclass in user-centered design, platform dynamics, and again, the challenges of trying to disrupt an entrenched industry like the broadcast TV industry.
Yes.
Couldn't be any more entrenched.
Yeah, I think they create a bunch of interesting ingredients. They created a template for modern streaming user interface or user experience on TV. It was the first consumer product to use predictive algorithms for content discovery. It pioneered the concept of a season pass, where you can just click on the season pass button and it will automatically figure out how to record the first run of that series' episodes. And it really demonstrated how design and personality could differentiate tech products. In that 90s and early 2000s, it is one of those hallmark cases that just shows differentiation on design.
Yeah, and the brand, right? The brand really had a personality.
100%. So Albert, maybe you can tell us a little bit about the pre-TiVo TV landscape.
Yeah, okay, back to
ancient history.
Yeah, ancient. Basically, my lifetime.
People might be shocked.
We roll back the clock. The 90s was such a rich era of TV viewing, and when I say TV viewing, it's like you literally sat in front of TV to watch TV, which I think it's kind of quaint today. I don't think a lot of us just like sit around like we probably watch TV in so many different devices. But the TV was the centerpiece of people's lives in some ways.
Yeah, I remember people would say, "Oh, I can't that night because I have to watch Friends or I have to watch whatever show they were watching."
Yeah, or Seinfeld, or like there was these literally iconic shows that spoke to an era.
There's real anxiety about missing a show because it was just showed up.
It was must see TV, right? Literally, we call it must see.
There was this thing called VCRs, video cassette recorders, which were notoriously difficult to program. You needed to actually have patience and skills to figure out how to get a VCR to record.
Well, at least a post-grad degree.
Yeah, maybe a postdoc degree. So the friction was too high to record things that you just thought of real quickly. And so people didn't want to miss stuff because it would air and then you wouldn't catch it again until it was ran again in syndication or whatever.
Yeah, and I think that VCR problem highlights back to the design philosophy of, it's the anti-design actually. Like
Yeah.
we kind of talk about user-centered design and talk about user interface and the importance of removing friction. And it's, in some ways, I think the VCR was built on adding friction, because the technology, it was really engineered rather than human-centered, I would say.
Yeah, and there's a pattern in a lot of the Design Vault episodes, especially with the Japanese companies that were dominating the 80s and then trying to navigate the role of software on their devices. And that's where you see American companies having opportunities like TiVo and Apple. And so this is where you kind of see the ingenuity of software taking the scenario to another level.
Yeah, and building off that taking advantage of that software is really how the TiVo story started.
And TiVo wasn't necessarily the only thing happening at that time. There were a lot of early digital attempts. Replay TV was a competitor that showed up on the scene at the same time as TiVo. Web TV came from Microsoft as well as Media Center. There were digital cable boxes, which had terrible interfaces but had the advantage of distribution. And then you had DVD players that had no recording capability. And then you had an industry structure where networks controlled the viewing habits. Advertisers really paid for captive audiences. Cable companies were the gatekeepers, and there wasn't really much user data or feedback loops outside of the traditional Nielsen's kind of manual statistics that they were doing at that time.
When you have such an entrenched industry and in some ways very locked in standards, right? We probably won't get into the whole VHS versus beta, but there was so much effort to create dominant standards.
Yeah.
When you have those kind of conditions, it's actually ripe for disruption.
100%. And Albert, with every one of these stories, there's some people that are at the beginning of the story. Can you tell us the unlikely TV revolutionaries that kickstarted TiVo?
I would say the two key people were Mike Ramsey and Jim Barton, who were engineers at Silicon Graphics, SGI, working on interactive TV technology. At the same time, when they were developing this new technology, they weren't able to get traction.
Yeah, I think so. Mike Ramsey was a Scottish engineer. He moved to Silicon Valley. He worked on the Nintendo 64 architecture at Silicon Graphics. For people who don't know, the Nintendo 64 required developers to actually buy Silicon Graphics boxes to develop on them. But that's another episode for maybe another time. He was frustrated with the corporate bureaucracy, and his vision was to make a TV work like a computer, which is kind of the opposite of what TiVo was. And then Jim Barton, Albert, if you can tell us a little bit about him.
Yeah, Jim was a Texas-born engineer, also worked at SGI along with Mike. And he was obsessed with user interface design. And again, if you look back in the 90s, it was just the beginning of user interface design as a field of expertise. And he had a philosophy that technology should be invisible.
That's quite revolutionary for that time, because people were about more Chrome, more stuff, more junk.
Well, it's also the era of human-machine interface, where a lot of the work was making the human adapted machine versus, I think now we're much more human-centered approach.
Yeah.
And I think Jim really latched on this idea that technology should be invisible because it makes it more usable and more useful.
Yeah, it's this idea of conformability. You should not have to conform to the thing should conform to you. And the founding moment came in 1997, where they were both laid off from Silicon Graphics on the same day. They decided to start a company, and they called it originally Teleworld. And the initial idea was a home network computer. That was the original vision, but ultimately they pivot. So Albert, maybe you can walk us through this plot twist.
Yeah, maybe that was a bit too ambitious. And I think they pivoted to, hey, what if we just fix TV? I think that's why when they actually got some traction. But now, because we have a more constrained problem, that's the plot twist. TiVo wasn't supposed to be a DVR. Ramsey and Barton's original vision was much broader. Like they wanted to create this home network computer.
I mean, imagine this, right? It's the original Teleworld concept was a network computer for the home that would handle email, web browsing. You would also do TV. It would be your central hub for digital life.
Sounds great.
Oh, yeah. I've heard these pitches before, and they suck because what happens is you essentially try to bring in a PC with all its crap into your living room, but it's not really ready for that, right?
Yeah, it's trying to make a tractor, truck, and a sports car, and all in one, right?
100%. We see this happening finally today, but you don't necessarily see web browsing on TV as much. But you see things like, okay, I can play music and I can connect to my digital collection, but it's not a PC. Okay, so they realized that TV was the killer app. They pivoted, like you mentioned, and they focused on one thing: time shifting.
Not time traveling, time shifting.
No, that was supposed to be V3. Oh. So they realized TV was the killer app. They focused on one thing. It was time shifting. They used hard drives, which was revolutionary for consumer devices at the time. And they simplified it to pause, rewind, and record.
We were most often met with incredulity. How can you pause live TV? There's no way to do that. So if you go to somebody and say, well, I can give you control over your television watching, they go, well, I already have control. They don't quite internalize it. And the chief way in which we could really get people to understand the notion is we sat them down in front of the prototype and we said, here's the remote, now do it. And it's once you pause and you start to actually experience for yourself that level of control, then you get the light goes on in your head.
Right, it was all digital, right? This is all software driven.
This is all software driven, but the signal that was coming in was an analog signal, but that didn't matter. They had guide data and stuff like that, and they would encode the analog media into MPEG, into digital format.
Right, so they did compression. So back to software, allowed them.
Totally. Software is the magic that enabled this with a little bit of first-party hardware. And they named it TiVo instead of the original name, which was Teleworld. They almost named it Bongo. I'm glad they called it TiVo.
Was that like a Matthew McConaughey kind of thing? Or
yeah. Another 90s tradition was the capital, lowercase stuff that was happening.
Oh, yeah.
So if you look at the TiVo name, it's capital T, capital V, which is TV, and lowercase I, lowercase o, which is I/O, input-output.
Ah.
Yes. We won't talk about other companies that may overlap with that name, because we don't know what's going to happen. But at the time of recording. But the name story is great. They went through hundreds of names, and TiVo was chosen because it sounded friendly and it wasn't tech jargony.
Well, if they kept Bongo, they could have said like, hey, I'm going to go Bongo tonight.
No, I'm going to go TiVo Friends. Well, I never watched Friends, but I'll TiVo A-Team, whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Albert, tell us about this impossible challenge of getting something like this to market.
Yeah, but now it's 1998. Ramsey and Barton have this vision of a pausable TV that time shifting, and they did face a lot of hurdles. The technology itself actually didn't exist. They had to invent.
I love this story so much. It's such a great story.
Well, back to entrepreneurs and especially engineers who I think sometimes having these daunting problems is actually what makes it fun. What makes it like, hey, we could solve that. Their approach was to take very accessible technology at that time, like hard drives, even though they were expensive, they were quite small. And also they used compression, the MPEG-2 standard for encoding in real time, which was just being developed. And they had internet for the guide data so that you could actually be able to set the time to record and not have to go through that complicated programming, that little blinking clock. They had an interactive guide that you just click and say, hey, I want to record Friends at 8:00. And actually, like today, we take that, like, of course, that's how you do it. But back then, this was quite revolutionary. And that solved a lot of problems people had. Back to that, being able to watch TV when you want.
Amazing. When you kind of talk through how easy it was to record, I remember buying a TiVo because I hated the idea of buying a DVD player. because the DVD player was too much work. Why was it too much work? Well, number one, I have to go to this place, a physical place, that you actually had to rent a shiny disc. And nothing is sadder than on a Friday night going into a DVD or video rental shop by yourself and not finding any movies because they've all been rented.
What, Thamer? That's actually, for me, that's a good time on a Friday night.
But there's no movies, and then the rewind fees, and then the late fees.
Yes.
And so, yeah, I would much rather season pass record The West Wing and binge watch that than deal with all the crap of going to a video store.
Wow, the late fees, was my problem.
But anyway, I digress, as I typically do. So they had one crucial insight, which is they didn't need everyone to get it. They just needed early adopters and the people who were already hacking solutions with multiple VCRs. And those people would evangelize. And I think that's what happened. And really, it's easy to imagine how to evangelize something when the experience is life-changing or so different that removes all this friction. So maybe, Albert, you can describe to us a little bit what TiVo is, just describe the experience, the hardware, the software, et cetera.
Well, let's transport us to walking into a Best Buy store in March 1999. You're going through the TV section, and then you see this.
What kind of haircut do you have in 1999? A fade?
Well, fade. I don't want to say mullet.
Were you wearing a baseball cap those days?
No, there's a Canadian term called a hockey mullet. It's a modified mullet. So, yeah.
Okay, yes, your Canadian roots.
Yes. So, and you walk in there and you see this display, a 14-inch Philips TV with something unusual connected to it.
And the first thing you notice is the box, which is like a basic black box with almost no buttons on it. Maybe it had 2 buttons, power and I think record. Ports were hidden behind a door, whisper quiet fan. But then, Albert, I think you should talk about the most iconic part of this experience.
Yeah, remember, like back then, like so much focus was on the box itself. Like you had displays, like VCR or DVD. Right. Everything was like, you had a bunch of buttons. Like the TiVo was just this black box with this. I remember it was like just had the logo. It was very a streamline, let's just say.
Yeah, minimal.
But the focus was actually the entire interface was on the remote, and it was this iconic peanut remote. Featured this peanut kidney shape that was, again, it created this affordance where it's easy to pick up, but also invited you to pick it up. And it fit naturally in the hand. It had a rubberized texture. And it also had this very bright and friendly button layout with pop of colors. And there were 2 buttons I thought really was quite new and innovative. It had a thumbs up and thumbs down button. Like, you have to remember back then, there was like there's no preconception what that is. It was all new.
Yeah, and it had this giant play pause button in the middle. It was probably the most elegant play pause button. But I'm going to go on record here with all our listeners and make a proclamation, Albert. Are you ready? I think it's are you sure you're ready?
I think so. I'm sitting down. I'm sitting down.
Okay, are you sitting down now? Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's the best remote control design of all time.
Wow. I'm going to record that.
We'll get back to the remote in a second, but I think the remote drove this on-screen interface, super clean animated menus, sound effects were very iconic, and they did some really cool tricks on the response time, right?
Yeah, it felt pretty snappy at that time. Again, for me, that was actually one of the first, besides video games, which was very different, because you don't necessarily use a remote. This is the first TV interactive experience I had was actually with a TiVo and an on-screen interface. I think they broke through with a lot of firsts, I think, in terms of that user interface for TV.
Yeah.
Having audio cues in addition to visual cues to navigate menus, like that seems like, of course, that's how you do it. But back then...
No, they put on a clinic. It was a clinic of user experience design. New concepts like the now playing list, it was revolutionary at the time. The wish list would be the things that were coming ahead. And the genius of this design is it made the incredibly complex feel simple and friendly. And every design decision served that goal.
There were competitors like Replay TV, I remember, was making a black box for techies. TiVo was designed for humans, for consumers.
Yes.
And that focus on the remote, I think it was a genius move.
Designed by Paul Newby and team at TiVo with the support of IDEO. Many prototypes tested, ambidextrous design. And Albert, maybe you can tell us about the button philosophy and the hidden complexity.
Yeah, I think the buttons, and I think one thing about remote, a lot of people don't think about, it's actually the weight and the center of gravity. How when you hold it, when you pick it up, making sure it's balanced so it doesn't top heavy. Having worked on game pads and game controllers, like when you hold something in your hand, you want it to feel balanced, like an instrument. And being able to make it, again, this seems so quaint now, but make it thumbable.
Yes.
Like I remember working on soft keyboards, like what's the range and the reach of the thumb?
Yes.
And I think the team really focused on that. Again, when you lay out a remote, just like laying out a keyboard, where do you put the primary functions, the most often used functions, versus the secondary or tertiary functions? That way it hide the complexity. And you only focus on the most often used features, and that's the layout. TiVo, the Peanut remote, was instrumental in breaking through and creating almost like a new paradigm for user interface on TVs.
The learning curve for TiVo was probably 5 minutes, if not less.
Having that TV, the guide itself on TV, that was for me, a breakthrough in terms of interface design. So TiVo wasn't just a machine. It had a personality, the UI. Felt like it was a fun way to interact. So it had these animations and audio cues I remember it was like beep, bop, like these kind of fun tones.
Flip, 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 flip. Yeah.
Yeah. It used color really well. It was color coded. There was no harsh error messages with like cryptic numbers, and so I think overall the personality really came through in their UI.
What's interesting about this era of the TiVo and other things that were happening at the same time is there was a lot of innovative engineers and designers who figured out that you have to hide the machine, right? If you're going to do some digital thing, don't just expose all the guts and all command prompts. And what can you do to make it so easy that it's a really conforming to the user, to the human?
Yeah,
right?
I think in UX we call it like progressive disclosure now, right? Like when it's not hiding things. It's like when you need it, it's just surface up the feature.
I think I'm talking about something a little different. I agree with that. This is just, it was a Linux computer.
Right.
And back then, everything was basically, you want a TV thing. Okay, then you have to put a keyboard and a mouse to it, launch the TV app, and then you can use a remote control.
Right.
It wasn't just progressive disclosure, which they did, and it was amazing how they did it. They had a button down or buttoned up philosophy of how they really wanted this thing to be.
Yeah, so it was more like a appliance.
Yes.
Perhaps.
That's the word.
Than a computer, right?
100%.
And I think that appliance-like, where you interact because there's a very clear intent. Like, I want to watch TV at this time. And you don't have to jump through all these different hoops in terms of navigating the OS to find where's that app.
Yeah.
And what's the submenu to actually record something.
Yeah, and so maybe we can talk a little bit about the hidden technical innovations. The time shifting engine, for example. There's a constant recording buffer happening at all times.
Right, and they had to invent this. They had to solve and create this.
Yes.
Wow.
Simultaneous reading and writing the disk,
Right.
MPEG-2 compression and hardware, smart disk management. When do you delete things? When do you erase things? When do you clear up space? And then, Albert, do you remember this piece of... Do you remember hooking up your TiVo to a phone line?
Yeah.
And why did you do that?
Maybe that's one of those things you don't expect, like, oh, you need a phone line for your TV. But this is this is the internet back then.
But tell our listeners, why would you hook up your Gen 1 TiVo to a phone line?
Yeah, so the key part of the experience was the guide. Having this guide data system that would be real time, that would be updated, that would be constantly refreshed based on what's on TV. So they had a daily dial up to download the latest guide with, I believe it was 14-day program guide. So you could actually program things or watch TV like, hey, I want to watch a show 2 weeks from now. And it had metadata for every show, meaning you can actually describe what the episode is going to be. And it created also a genre categorization. So if you want to watch sci-fi or murder mystery or any type of show. That to me speaks to the power of software. Now you can create more engaging, more personalized content, and allows you to find the things that you like.
Yeah. Like once at night, it would dial up, download the latest version of the guide for the next 2 weeks because the guides are always changing. And today, that's basically table stakes for any kind of viewing experience, which is it's amazing how they were able just to bend everything around the user. Other device manufacturers probably would have just balked at having to do that kind of stuff.
Well, it's a service too, right? So a lot of device
Yeah.
manufacturers wouldn't even contemplate or having a service.
Right.
And I think TiVo felt like that was actually the key to unlocking this amazing experience.
Then you had this recommendation engine, right? TiVo would fill the empty space in its drive with things that it thinks you might like based on what you gave thumbs up and thumbs down to, based on things you watched, and I think probably based on anonymous data aggregation and learning algorithms, would do this predictive recording. It could aggregate all this data across its viewers and then make an informed guess. This is what we see today in ad tech, So
it was the first time that a service can provide recommendation that was truly personalized. It was not just like a bunch of random shows like, hey, you might like this. This idea of actually using the like button and the ups and down to personalize, that was a big breakthrough. And again, you see that today, and you see both the positive but also the unintended consequences when we reinforce or give you too much of what you like. And it can also create other problems. TiVo broke new ground, but was the innovator that developed this new way to enjoy and watch TV.
And it was built on Linux. And Linux is a free operating system. You saw a trend begin at that time of manufacturers moving to Linux to do smart appliance products.
Yeah. And for me, it was also that era, especially that 90s, where this idea of consumer electronics was moving away from these kind of disconnected devices. Like you think about a Walkman, a DVD player, they were all unconnected, to now you're connected to the internet, you're connected to these services, and it actually expanded the capabilities beyond just what's in the box.
Yeah, they were using the term smart as a prefix before the thing, smart TV, right around the late 90s, early 2000s. That kind of was code for, hey, we're using digital technology to make this thing smart, not like it was before. I love this story because users didn't need to know that was running Linux, didn't need to know anything. They just needed to turn it in, plug it in, whatever they need to plug in, and just go.
Yeah, it's a box.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Albert, when we talk about TiVo's impact, what we're really talking about is how it fundamentally changed humanity's relationship with time and video. It sounds hyperbolic, but it's not.
Well, you're definitely right about that. It's not hyperbolic, at least for me. Like, changing behavior has been a key part of, at least my focus in terms of the work I've been doing recently around technology and design, that we're not, for a long time, we haven't been, it's not about designing the device or the artifact anymore. And when you design for behaviors, it's actually a different way to design, and especially in this era of AI, where our relationship has changed with technology. And TiVo was the precursor, if not one of the first device experience that alter the way you behave and change the dynamics and change the social paradigm. So to me, that end of the appointment television is such a big milestone in how technology has evolved and how technology has evolved us.
And, sometimes it has these downsides, like the birth of, but maybe it's not a downside, or maybe it is. It's the birth of binge watching and binge watch culture, right?
Yeah. Every technology has a both positive and not so positive impact. The birth of binge culture was probably one of the unintended consequence of TiVo and the technology, that no longer do you just watch one episode. You could, like you said, record all the episodes and then watch it all at once.
Yeah.
That's kind of behavior we expect today, but it didn't exist before TiVo.
No, and interesting thing is you kind of see cable networks will run syndication, and they'll do kind of a season in a week. That's where TiVo shined, where you could just say record, all episodes of this thing, and then you come back from a trip, and then you had 5 seasons of The West Wing or whatever show. That came in handy when I had the flu. Now, there's also personalization, right? The TV's learning what you like. No more channel surfing. The experience becomes curated. However, there's a controversy, right? Commercials. Being able to fast forward, skip a few seconds. The ad industry was panicking, and there were lawsuits and threats.
It's only controversial, perhaps on the business side. For the user side, the end user side, it was obviously this was a well-received feature. Like, people love being able to skip TV ads, and TiVo's business story is in some ways a triumph that turned into tragedy because of this controversy. They created immense value. People loved it, but they couldn't capture it.
It's a classic platform problem, right? TiVo needed the content providers, the cable companies, and the consumers all on board, but each group had these different interests and incentives.
Right. Back to that tension of, hey, it's consumers loved it, but the TV industry wasn't so thrilled about skipping commercials.
Let's get into the legal battles and industry resistance that was happening at the time. We really can't talk about TiVo without discussing the wars it triggered. The content industry saw TiVo as an existential threat. Their major replay TV at the time was undergoing a massive lawsuit because they had auto commercial skip.
And replay was a competitor.
They were the number one competitor. TiVo tried to stay neutral in there. I remember TiVo did not have automatic commercial skip. You would have to do a few things. You'd have to do work to skip a commercial, but you could still fast forward through it. But I think they showed at least enough good faith that they avoid the wrath that Replay TV could not in the first go. And Replay TV was forced to remove some features. And then there was the Time Warner dispute, Albert. Maybe you can give us a little bit of insight into that.
Yeah, Time Warner dispute was focused around their refusal to advertise on TiVo. And they also block interactive TV features and fought the ability for TiVo to publish their guide data. And eventually, though, it was settled, but it created a lot of friction for TiVo.
Yeah, there was patent wars also with EchoStar and Dish Network, where TiVo wins $500 million. That was big because they had originally a deal with Dish, and then slowly these TV providers start building their own DVR features. And I think there was a little bit of borrowing from Dish from TiVo, and that's where the lawsuit comes in. There was an AT&T settlement. There was a Verizon issue.
A lot of headwinds, as they say.
A lot of headwinds. And really, with a quite full IP portfolio, they become a licensing company as well.
So how did this all accumulate? Did it become just overwhelming for TiVo, or did something fundamentally change its business trajectory?
TiVo tried to do a bunch of stuff, right? They tried to work with providers and license their technology and or have their box designed and set up for that provider. As the providers started creating their own DVR-like features, the experience wasn't necessarily that good, but you can go to Comcast and they give you the box, and if it's on the box already, you see distribution advantage to the cable company.
So it became bundled.
Yeah, bundling by the providers
box.
Creates friction for new customers to acquire. That's TiVo, and so it becomes a commoditized feature, right? And it just over many years gets good enough,
right?
Right.
So ultimately, for TiVo, they were kind of stuck in this kind of innovator's trap where they had this really compelling technology and capabilities and a service, but the cable boxes were able to create their own DVR and that feature.
Yeah, there's always been in the media landscape these giant chess pieces. You have the content companies, you have distribution companies. When I say distribution, I mean either a phone company or a cable company. And so cable companies and phone companies have billing relationships. They have physical shops. They have people that you do support, and they sell you a service that you pay monthly for. And they're happy to just add another line item on that bill, and they own the thing. So they own a lot of stuff. Content providers also same. And so now you see this, the echoes of this continue to this day with cord cutting, where you have companies like Apple buying studios or Netflix buying studios. So it becomes this consolidation.
Well, it's the streaming
right?
wars.
It's distribution wars, right?
Yeah.
And so it's very hard for somebody to kind of come up with an individual box and create a market without having the cooperation of these entities, right?
And because they didn't own the content, and likewise, they didn't own the endpoint. So
yeah, and why would I pay an extra monthly fee for something that the cable company is providing for me nominally for much less? I don't necessarily know what TiVo is, but I know I have DVR. Why would I go pay extra for this? For the people who didn't know, for the people who love TiVo, which there are many of them, you could not pry the remote from their cold dead hands because they just were stuck. They really wanted to use it. Okay, so maybe this brings us to a few insights and analysis from the story. I think theme one, Albert, is the innovator's dilemma of creating a market you can't dominate.
Yeah, I think TiVo is perhaps the purest example of Clayton Christensen's innovator's dilemma, which we've covered in the show before. They were the first to market. They created the market for DVRs and educated consumers, gain adoption, build a category.
They proved the model.
Yeah, they definitely did. They showed and it was consumers loved it. It was a feature that they've been dreaming of in some ways, that I could watch TV whenever I want. But this is the but. I think cable companies eventually end up eating their lunch.
Yeah,
even with an inferior product.
100%. And the brutal part is that they saw it coming. They knew cable DVRs would be inferior, but quote unquote good enough.
Yeah, that good enough is it's one of those things that kind of grates at us designers and product people.
How could they not appreciate?
Like we're not
designers, especially.
Right. We spent so much time designing the remote and the interface.
So the dilemma breakdown. They spent millions educating consumers. They fought legal battles for everyone. They proved DVRs would not kill TV. They established the UI conventions, but cable DVRs were objectively, even though worse, they were free. Bundled.
Right, free is it's hard to compete with free.
Yeah.
So
and the cable companies regained control. Right, they integrated it with cable service, no extra remote, good enough for most. And then there was this platform squeeze where they needed the cable companies for content.
Right. Cable
companies became competitors, and they could not go fully adversarial, so they were trapped in frenemy relationships.
Yeah, it's probably one of those mutually assured destruction. Like there was no way for TiVo kind of break out of that relationship.
They kept on innovating with TiVo HD, Series 3, etc. But the innovation like that costs money. It's R&D. Cable DVRs copied features slowly, and premium features that TiVo was providing, few people wanted to pay for those, right?
Yeah. So do you think there's a lesson here about timing and market structure, Thamer?
Yeah.
Like being first, is that really important?
It's not. It's not necessarily important. The most important thing.
It's not a guarantee of success, maybe.
No, I think it's more important that your timing and your conditions are right. Right. I feel like the analogy would be the iPod versus the MP3 players that came before it. Right.
Actually, iPod wasn't first, right?
It was not first, right? Apple's really good at this in the 90s and early 2000s, especially of timing things such that the preconditions that you could rip a thing. Could have the software support, et cetera, for the scenario to be perfect. Whereas, there were plenty of what we call cable company DVR level MP3 players out there at the time. But they were, they just, all they did was maybe prove a little bit of a market, but then Apple came and ate their lunch. And that's what happened with TiVo and the cable companies. So theme number 2.
It's really between the user control and advertisers' interests.
Yeah, TiVo exposed a fundamental tension that still exists today. Users want control over their viewing experience. Advertisers want captive audiences, right? And so TiVo picked a side, and it cost them.
having worked on the ad business,
respond to that, sir.
I know. Advertisers aren't bad people, right? Like
I mean,
in some
I
ways,
don't know.
like,
They wear monocles and they have top hats.
I do believe in the free market, meaning a manufacturer of products wants to reach their customers. That's what advertising is. A product or service trying to reach their customers.
But they're interrupting your favorite TV show, Frasier.
Right. And the tension is not necessarily the advertiser. It's really about the actual experience, that interruption, those ads that pop up when you don't want to see them. When our ads are relevant and meaningful and actually connects to a user need, that's what advertisers want. And so I think it's more about a mismatch of customer needs and their expectation and the advertiser's ability to reach them. So I believe this battle has been played out ever since advertising started. If you look at print, you look at radio, you look at mass media to the current ability to create more personalized media, and I think that's where the shift is starting to happen. That's an experiment that's still ongoing, I would say.
Yeah, what we have today that we didn't have before is you have the ability to have large catalogs of streaming without ads because you can pay a subscription that is a higher tier, for example, right?
Right. And that's what free television was. It wasn't necessarily free.
Somebody had to pay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Got it. Okay, so let's get into the conflict. What users wanted, they wanted to skip all commercials, watch on their schedule, no interruptions, and personalized experience. What advertisers wanted was guaranteed viewership, no skipping, demographic data, and purchase attribution. TiVo's compromise, they actually did have, I think, a 29-second skip button, but it was not automatic. You could fast forward with preview, so you could see the ad in the background. They provided anonymous viewing data, and they also provided a mechanism for advertisers to put showcase ads in over.
Yeah, so they could create ad modules
in the UI. Yeah. So TiVo did try to thread the needle and give users control while keeping the advertisers happy. It was probably impossible.
I think there was quite a few modern parallels to digital experiences today that really built on TiVo's legacy. And one of the one that's obviously kind of key to our work is design matters more than technology.
Yeah. Go design. Yeah.
I'm not biased here. I'm not biased. But I think TiVo won because of its UX, not because of the specs, not because it had better compression. The experience that it delivered did require better compression, but the user didn't have to know about it, right? It was seamless.
Yeah.
And they had a brand and a personality that really shined and reinforces the overall experience. And the simplicity of its feature set with the delight of, wow, I can magically skip commercials. Like that for me was one of the key lessons about design's impact.
I think the other big lesson is business model innovation is crucial. Good tech and experience, good user experience, good user interface isn't enough. You have to control distribution or die. Subscription models need scale, and the platform dynamics of content are brutal.
Yeah.
Right.
A key around having the industry that will support you rather than resist you. And sometimes that bridge can be way too far.
Yeah. TiVo was a bridge, not a destination. Yeah. The bundle beats better. Right, me bundling it for free is better than
the cable set-top box. You need one, so if you bundle that feature and it's free, well, you can't compete.
Good enough usually wins, and distribution is king. Right, standards matter more than innovation. Sadly, maybe that was too harsh.
Well, no, but I think Thamer, I think there are modern parallels that a company perhaps like Peloton. Remember, like Peloton. Similar to TiVo, had a product that customers love, but also had platform challenges.
Yeah, with music licensing, right?
And getting distribution, getting that product out there, and getting people to pay a subscription. So,
Albert, what's your biggest takeaway from this?
Well, for me, it's this. It's the duality and in some ways this bittersweet nature of true innovation, where TiVo didn't just make a better VCR, they imagine an entire new way of watching TV, a whole new experience, whole new behaviors. Solving that one problem doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be successful.
Yeah, I think that's what makes TiVo such a profound on-brand story for this podcast, because it's not just about great design as a triumph. It's also about great design struggling against entrenched systems. Peanut Remote and that friendly interface weren't just good UX, they were philosophy, and TiVo believed technology should liberate, not dictate. And also, pro tip, you can still get a TiVo remote. I don't know how many acquisitions we are with this.
Yeah, what rev?
I don't know how many times it's changed hands, but you can literally get it and you can have it work with your Apple TV and things like that. And there's something almost poetic about this. TiVo gave us control over time with time shifting, but they really couldn't control their own destiny or their own timing, right? They democratized television, but they really couldn't escape the oligarchy of cable companies. They invented the future, but they were trapped in their real present.
Thanks for joining us on this journey through the Design Vault. Next time you skip an ad or pause a show, maybe think about that little peanut remote that TiVo created and the company that dared to challenge time itself.
Until then, keep questioning why things work the way they do and imagining how they can work better. Please like and subscribe and leave a review. We would love to hear from you. Thanks.
Thank you.